Welcome to the Pet Loss Companion. I'm Ken Dolan-Del Vecchio, and I'm here with my friend and co-author and colleague Nancy Saxton-Lopez. And this is a broadcast that we do every Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern. And it's an opportunity for us to share some thoughts and some guidance on helping people with the loss of a pet. And it actually is a way to bring some of the content that we shared in our book, The Pet Loss Companion, Healing Advice from Family Therapists Who Lead Pet Loss Groups, with an even wider audience through this new technology. So thank you for joining us, whether you're joining us live or listening to the podcast or looking at one of the videos later on. And we very much appreciate your questions and comments and suggestions for topics. So please don't hesitate to send us those. You can reach me at Ken, D as in David, D as in David, V as in Victor @gmail.com. And you can reach Nancy at nsaxtonlopez, that's nsaxtonlopez @csmpc.com. This program is a friend of Dakin Humane Society in Springfield, Massachusetts. Dakin is a 501c3 community-supported animal welfare organization that provides shelter and medical care and spay-neuter services and behavioral rehabilitation for more than 20,000 animals and people each year. They're very committed to helping with the animal-human bond. And since its inception in 1969, Dakin has become one of the most recognized nonprofit organizations in Central Mass and a national leader in animal welfare. You can learn more about Dakin and make a donation at dakinhumane.org. That's DAKINHUMANE.org. Nancy, want to get us started?
Yes, I wanted to share that I have an anniversary today. It just is today, and at the time that we're doing our podcast. And my little heart dog, Hank, died today, 2 years ago. I'm going to show you him. I have my formal picture of him and I. There you go. This is my little formal picture.
He was very cute.
And I also will show you just another. He's very difficult because he's a black pug, so it's very difficult to kind of see him.
I see a tongue.
Yes, you see a tongue, right?
Well, that's
so. Hank was born January 4th, 2007, and he was one of 5 from a union of our 2 dogs, Jack and Rosie, that weren't planned. That wasn't planned. Wow. And we kept Hank and we kept Molly. Molly, of course, died this past May. But what was special about Hank is, I think, what I went through with him. He developed epilepsy when he was about 7 or 8. They thought it was brain tumor, but luckily it wasn't. It was epilepsy. But the medication for that caused him to have a skin condition and anemia. Besides that, he had multiple hospitalizations over the years for seizures. He had a toe removed. He had bladder surgery. He had emergency gallbladder and spleen removed, which was $12,000.
Wow.
Various hematomas in his ears. And then at 10, he developed diabetes. So this little man, I called him my little man. He and I were very close. You know, I took care of him every day. It took about 45 minutes in the morning to make sure I got his blood sugar and I got his meds, and we went for a walk. And he also, I guess, became my heart dog because of that, but also because he was my Velcro. I could not, if I was in the house, he was on me. Mm-hmm. You know, he was at my feet. He was on me. He followed me. He slept with me as close as he could, right? And we were inseparable, and I really miss him.
Oh,
so I wanted to share that.
He's so alive in your memory. He's so alive in your memory. And we're going to actually talk about that a little bit later, about holding on to the memories of our beloved animal companions. But it's so obvious that the thought of him brings you such joy.
Yes. I wish he was here so I could hug him, but
yeah.
He is in my spirit, right?
Yep,
His
absolutely.
spirit is with me. Say that.
Yep. So that's great. That's great. Thank you for sharing all that, Nancy, and bringing his memory alive in the
Alive,
way that
yes.
you just did. Yeah, yeah. So I'm going to start off by telling a story that we received this past week, and I'm not going to read the whole account because it's very detailed, and we really appreciate that. It comes from a woman named Rachel, and she told us that she had a 2-year-old dog who was just really, really important to her for a number of reasons, of course. One of which that he was brought into the family on the anniversary of a date that was very traumatic for her, that marked trauma for her. And something really bad had happened to her on that date, 8 years prior to him coming into the family. And he was a great little dog. He was 2 years old, and he was outside, and he got a hold of a dead bird. He got a hold of a dead bird, and she ran to try to get it away from him. And it was really gross and disgusting. And he was eating part of it. And before she could do much of anything, he had eaten some of it. And she also has a very young child, and she's pulled in a lot of directions, as parents of young children are. And the dog came inside and seemed to be okay. And I got to tell you, when I was just telling you before we went on the air, that I have a new puppy, as you know. I have Hildy, and she eats all kinds of crap. I mean,
Yes.
everything you can imagine. And dogs do. I mean, it's part of their nature.
Good.
They eat carrion. They eat dead animals. They eat other animals' poop. That's part of their nature. It's part of the way they're wired. So they're omnivorous. They eat all kinds of stuff. They eat grass. They eat all kinds of things that you and I would find totally disgusting. And almost always, there's no problem.
Yeah,
They just
usually do.
process it. They've got really serious guts, and they deal with it. And unfortunately, what happened to this dog, his name is Otis, is that after about 4 days, he started showing signs of difficulty. He looked like he was sick, and he was choking, and so they took him to a vet, and they told him what had happened, and the vet did a whole bunch of checking and whatnot, and they decided that he had an infection. So they treated him with antibiotics, and she took him to the vet 3 times more, and they did all the testing they thought was necessary. They actually, I believe, did exploratory surgery to see that if there was anything that was in particular wrong. But what they didn't catch, and what happened to be really the problem, was there was a part of the bird that was caught in his esophagus. And on, I believe, the 4th or 5th day after all of these visits to the vet, he was in great distress.
Mhm.
And the long and short of it is that he passed away.
Right.
And so she continues to be really distraught. This happened very recently. It happened about a week or so ago, if even. And she's just reeling with this.
And she's
And
also feeling guilty, right?
feeling very
Feeling
guilty.
guilty.
Like, why didn't I get that away from
Right,
him?
right.
And you and I have both been in touch, and we'll say a bit more about it here. But in hindsight, we've talked about how in hindsight you see very clearly what was the cause in this kind of a circumstance, and you feel like, I should have done something differently. But
Different.
of course, at the time, you did everything
Everything you
imaginable
possibly could.
to try to remedy what you were seeing as the symptoms. And
Exactly.
who would imagine that this very freak incident would actually cause him to die? I mean, it's very strange. This isn't the kind of thing. Dogs don't eat crap and then die. They eat crap and they just go on and do whatever their
Dog.
lives are, and they do it over and over again for the most part. And the fact that she and her family responded just so appropriately. There's nothing else that any one of us would have done differently with
No.
this. And
No.
it wasn't caught. The veterinarians weren't able to determine what was going on. And unfortunately, little Otis died. And a
So
very, very sad story. But again, we really want to stress that we can do everything right
Right.
and still there's the loss. Still, it
Exactly.
happens. And of course, we're going to have all kinds of recriminations and the would have, should have, could have, as we talked about, but we are not all seeing. We don't know everything. We do the best we can.
And she did the best she could. She
Absolutely.
went to the vet multiple times,
Yeah.
and she was still, as we all know, we've talked about on the show over and over, she still was feeling guilty. I mean,
Oh,
he was
and
only 2, and the interesting thing with he died on the same date as the tr
yeah,
as they
right,
got
right.
from the
That trauma.
trauma. So he
Yeah.
died 2 years to that date.
2 years after the date he was adopted was the
Exactly,
day he died.
right.
And so that marks that date in a way that is painful again.
Exactly.
And it's,
It was interesting because I said I talked a little bit or emailed a little bit back and forth
mhm,
with her, and and of course she loved Otis
mhm,
beyond. I mean, we all do when we have our animals that we love so much, and he was there to, in some ways, replace those feelings, right,
yep, yep, yep.
from the trauma she had suffered
To
from.
change, yeah, to change the whole meaning of that date, right?
Yeah.
As much as possible.
So
Yeah.
I kind of tried to reframe it for her
Mhm.
because I said, maybe now this date next year will have, and maybe his death will take precedence, the anniversary of his death take precedence over the trauma, where you can celebrate his
His
life
life.
and
Yeah.
yours and
Yeah.
hers.
Kind of like what you did with Hank, where you remember the fact that he was here.
Right.
Yeah.
And how wonderful that relationship was, albeit brief, and
Yeah.
how much joy that he gave her. And so it moves it, it's sad and it's an
Terribly
anniversary,
sad.
but you can look at, the good that you got from those 2 years with Otis and how he helped her,
Yeah.
in essence, work through what that date meant for her.
It's it, hopefully that can be something that shines a bit of a brighter light on the date. But boy,
It's
that's
a
a hard one.
Of course.
That's really a hard one. And that's just, it's hard. And so she'll work through it, as people do, as we all do, with losses, and with layered losses is the way that I would
That's
probably
right.
think about this, that there are many layers to the loss associated with that day.
And also, I think it was helpful when we both talked to her about the dogs do this.
Oh,
I mean, this is part of like you were talking about
first
Hill.
thing I
This
thought of
is
when
what they do.
I read her note, I'm like, how much incredibly vile stuff have my dogs eaten over their lifetimes, and nothing bad has
Has never
ever
happened,
has
right?
ever happened.
And
And
you can't have them in a bubble, you
yeah,
know?
yeah, no, you can't. And you want them to be outside. You want them to be being dogs. I mean, that's what dogs
That's
do.
what they do.
So
But that helped her, I think, a little bit. She felt a little better with that,
yeah,
that she would not have a way to change what a dog does.
yeah, yeah,
But it was a very sad story, and we thank Rachel for allowing us to talk about it.
yeah. So do we want to go on to the next
Yeah,
question?
sure.
So this is we're asking people to send questions and comments, and so we got a question from a gentleman named Eric, who wrote, "I've been struggling with the following. I know some of these topics have been covered, but some might not have. I have a lot of stuff still in the house," and this is for his dog Sneer, who died recently. I have a lot of his stuff still in the house, his beds, toys, even his food bowls. My other two dogs still play with the toys and lay on some of the beds. However, is this counterproductive? I feel like if I pick all that stuff and get rid of it, my connection will be severed and finality will set in. Secondly, I have a fear of forgetting him. I'm not sure why. It's extremely troubling. I feel this time next year, everything will fade. And if I don't keep the pain will fade. And if I don't keep the pain close, I'll forget what he was like, what made him him, and I'll forget our bond. And so
Well,
this whole question of how do we hold on and what do we do with their things, and maybe you can say a little bit more about the relationship, because you corresponded with
well,
Eric a
right.
bit.
I think that I think in some ways Sneer appeared to be a little like Hank, except that Hank had physical issues, and I think Sneer maybe had some behavioral issues, if I'm not mistaken. So he was really working with this dog.
Yeah.
He really loved this dog. He was attached to this dog. He was supporting and helping this dog. And so when, he died, obviously it had, like when Hank died, no matter how much I love all my dogs, right? But when Hank died, it was a little bit different because there was so much intensity with him. And I think for Eric, I think that was partly for Sneer too. But I also want to say that we'll never forget them. Right?
Yeah, it's really not.
It happened.
It is the kind of thing that people worry about
Yeah.
in their grief, because the experience of not having them anymore physically present before they've settled inside of you the way they will eventually brings about that all kinds of questions, like will exactly what he's struggling with. But as you integrate them into your heart,
They're just there.
they're there.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's one thing we really want to reiterate to everyone out there, that you will never forget them. Now the memories are there. They may soften,
Yeah.
I mean, my Tashi died in 1989,
Mhm.
So, I mean, she's still there.
Yeah.
And so, but it's something that will never leave you, and I think,
and you can bring them forward
yes.
through recollections, and we want to talk some about that. But what about the artifacts? What about the bowls and the toys and the
Don't you think it's like a personal choice? I
Yeah.
think the issue is that we would hesitate, or not hesitate, but to actually let people know, is to be careful not to get rid of everything immediately.
Immediately? Yeah.
We've
Yep.
had that. We had it at the group,
Yep.
and they got rid of everything. I mean, got rid of it, didn't pack it
Mhm.
up, just got rid of it. And unfortunately, a week, 2 weeks, a month later, they regretted it.
Yep.
And so it was impulsivity. Now, the other side of that is I still have Hank's bowl, and I still use his bowl every day. I just do. You can hold on to the artifacts or have them there for as long as you want.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's very when Abigail died, it was a very, very painful loss for me and Tim. I came home, and we have a child gate that goes around the door that we use most frequently. And the reason we have that is because when Abigail was very little, we were away for a few days. We had a pet sitter, and she rushed the door, and the pet sitter opened the door, and it broke her leg.
Oh, geez.
Kind of, because they were tiny little dogs, and her leg
Yeah.
went under, and so she was in a cast, and it was really quite something. She was in a cast, and she had to stay in a very confined space for a long time. But when I came home, I was in this I was pretty distraught and irrational, and I took a screwdriver and I removed that gate, because it reminded me of her suffering in
Yeah,
some
sure,
way.
of course.
And I took it out and I put it in the barn. And I mean, I did it that when we came home, right after she had died. Like, we came home without her, and I did that in this almost like a panic. Like, I got to do something.
Yeah, you have to motivate,
And,
activate.
and now we have a new puppy, and I put the gate back.
Well, you have to.
Put it exactly back, because I don't want the puppy racing to the door and or even racing out the door before we're ready. And it's so grief can be, there's so much, for me, there can be so much irrationality.
Well, look, with all that emotion, we can't be rational, right? I mean, there's so much of it. It overwhelms us.
But on the other hand, all of the toys, we have these toys. I'll show it one day, one of them is we call it Pinkie. It's this little dog, stuffed dog. And whoever put this together deserves some kind of award, because Pinkie has been with us for 21 years.
Oh my goodness.
And she looks fine. Throw her in the washing machine. So now Hildy, the new dog, has her. And she has Froggy too. Froggy doesn't look quite so good. Froggy hasn't come through the years quite so well. But it's real for me. It's actually soothing to see them playing with the same, and they have the same dishes because there's such a sense of. And I honestly feel, I feel like Abigail at least is communicating that she's thrilled about that. That she's
I'm sure she is.
That she's here, because God knows somebody's going to chew on Pinkie.
That's right. Pinkie's in it for the long haul.
But seriously, I throw Pinkie in the wash and she's just as good as new.
But yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter. In fact, I think in Eric's case, he has 2 other dogs, right? So some of the dogs are using the bed, some of the other dogs are playing with Sneer's toys. And so there's nothing wrong with how long you have them out.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter if it's comfortable. At some point in time, you may put them away. You may not throw them out. You may
and you may do what I do. You may put them away and then bring them back out.
And there's nothing wrong with that. It's all about what you need through that process of grieving.
Yeah.
And if those things bring you closer to your animal who's died, then that's good. That's fine.
Yeah. So let's talk in our last little bit. Let's talk about how do we keep the memory alive. And I do want to say that what you did was a great example of that. You take the picture out, you remember the anniversary dates, and maybe you do that on holidays, and maybe you do that on their birthday. And you remember them, you talk about them, you share with other people what they meant to you. And you have like your story about that. This was my friend Hank. This was our life. And I felt like it brought him to life right here.
It did. And he is alive in spirit with me. And like Abigail and Isabel are for you, and Jack, and and Henry. I mean, all the Henrys.
All of them. Really.
All the Henrys.
There's a lot of Henrys. That's a whole other story.
But yes, pictures, photos, videos, photo albums, scrapbooks, all of that is going to keep their memory alive, right?
Yeah.
And saving, some people have taken like a collar and a toy and done a shadow box, and they have it, planting a garden. A lot of people do outside work.
Yeah. We have a lily garden for Lily.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Actually, when we moved here, we noticed it, and we've cultivated it as we saw that as a marker that this was a good place for us to live, because there's a little garden that was lilies. Yeah.
And now you have 2 butterfly bushes.
Yes, we do. That's right. One for Isabel and one for Abigail.
Right?
Yeah.
And so it's creating an outdoor space.
Yeah. And my cat Diana is under a whole bunch of coreopsis perennial flowers and there's a little rock border around her. So whenever I'm near her, I'll say hello to her. I mean, she meant a lot to me. I didn't have her for very long, but she was really close to my heart, and in ways that, sometimes you can't understand why some animals touch us so deeply, but some of them really, really do. And
of course, that's why we have heart animals.
Yeah.
No matter how much we love all of them, there are a couple in our lives, or maybe a few that really create a different, a deeper, a little bit of a deeper level.
And there's one thing that I really do want to stress, and that is really do fight the urge to put the memory aside, to say they're gone, it's too painful, I don't ever want to think about them, I don't want to talk about them. And I know you have this too, but I've worked with families where somebody dies and the way they deal with it is to create a secret about their existence, that person's existence,
Which is
as
important.
though they never really were here, because we can't go anywhere near it because it'll open up this fountain of pain. And I want to caution viewers and listeners to not do that, to fight the impulse to do that, because
to repress it.
Yeah, when one of the things that I think it's really important to always keep in mind, and I always go back to what Mr. Rogers said, which is, if it's mentionable, it's manageable.
Yeah.
And if we can, we need to help our kids to deal with loss, and we deserve to help ourselves to embrace the reality of our lives, including all the losses. And the thing is that if you create a secret like that, it gets worse. It gets more powerful. It gets more. And then it's like, if you can't talk about Henry, let's say, and in my case, Henry could be a horse or a bird or a cat. My ex-wife used to say to me, "What is it with Henry?"
Yeah, I know. You had a lot of Henrys.
She assumed that my new dog would be named Henry. Interestingly, of course, but she's not. But if you can't talk about that relationship, then you can't talk about maybe a time when that person or that animal was at the forefront of something that happened. Like when you keep a secret, what starts happening is the secret gets bigger and bigger.
That's right.
You can't talk about the things that are close to that secret.
That's right.
And then you can't talk about the things that are close to the things that are close to that secret. So you can't do. We both knew somebody who couldn't go to a certain hospital because a dear relative of theirs had died there.
And they would never go back.
And they could not go there. And they were actually a clinician. So they couldn't go to visit a client who was in the hospital. And so you don't want to feed a secret ever. You want to try to open a secret.
It's hard to do.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. Grief is not easy. It's painful. Nobody wants to feel it.
Yeah.
But it is important. And there's just a couple other things, like to keep memories, is do the rituals you used to do. So take walks where you walked with your dog, or sit with your cat where you sat with where you sat and have some tea and just be in that environment. You could write a letter to them. You could do something in their memory.
Yep.
You could visit an animal psychic. But there are you can pay attention to anniversaries and holidays and birthdays and all of those things. And it creates a even though they're always with us, a special moment or a special event.
Yeah, I was visiting my aunt and uncle just last weekend, and I noticed across the street in the neighbor's yard was a very particular couple of statues, one of a dog and one of a cat. And I wondered, I didn't ask them, and maybe at some point I'll learn this, but my immediate thought was, I wonder if those are representative, if those represent animal companions that they've had, because they looked very particular. They didn't look like something that you'd just buy at a garden store or something like that. And that was very interesting. So people do all kinds of things to hold on to memories.
And you can do rituals and memorials as many times as you need. Don't have to just do it once.
Yeah, and we keep little pieces of our dog's hair, and every once in a while, not terribly frequently, but I might take them out and just kind of note that this is part of who they were, and anything like that. People have we all have our ways of navigating this.
So
Yep.
there are things that we can do, but to end, you will never forget them.
You won't have to. Don't worry about that. They'll stay close at hand.
And their spirits will come and visit you.
Yep. All right, Nancy. Well, as always, great talking with you.
Now, and by the way, I just want to say one thing, and we want to thank Eric too for asking those.
I want to thank Eric and Rachel for sharing. And by the way, if you send us a question or a story, it would be great if you could tell us if it's okay to use in the broadcast, because we will frequently ask if we get something that we think would be representative of many people's concerns, or we think it might be just important for people to hear, be helpful to other people, we're going to write back to you and ask if we can use it. So if you tell us up front, that's also just a helpful thing for us. So thanks very much.
Of course.